Okay, welcome back to another episode of Secure Governance. I'm your host, Jimmy Skirts, and now the GRC training will start to speed up. It'll become a little more intense, but we're going to go very slow. Now, this is lesson number 6. Obviously, I suggest you go back and you can look at the playlist, review lessons 1 through 5, excuse me. And again, this training will probably go 2 or 3 months. I'm not quite sure. A training will go out every 2 to 3 days. So now we are continuing with our prototype model, our company that we're using to learn GRC, RoboCorp. And today's topic is risk at RoboCorp, spotting dangers and staying ready. As a GRC analyst, an auditor, you have to know about the risk that an organization faces. So, welcome to lesson 6, where we'll explore how RoboCop identifies, manages, and prepares for potential risk in our dynamic robotics business. Understanding risk isn't just about avoiding problems, it's about staying competitive and trustworthy in an industry where safety and innovation go hand in hand. And remember, as a GRC analyst, auditor, etc., there are 3 main goals. Number 1, prevent the organization from being fined by a regulatory agency. Number 2, prevent the organization from being sued for a data breach. And number 3, which is really number 1, secure the data. Those are your 3 priorities. So in securing the data, you must understand risk. What could happen? Even if it hasn't happened, what happens if there is a breach? How do you handle it? How do you respond? Okay. So, why risk matters? Why risk matters? RoboCorp creates cutting edge robots for schools, hospitals, and manufacturing facilities worldwide. When something goes wrong in our business, whether it's stolen and intellectual property, system failures, or safety malfunctions, the consequences ripple far beyond our company walls. And I'm going to go back to the fact that I say a lot of times there are companies that have secure network systems. It's not the company's system, it's the third party vendor that they hook up with whose system becomes breached. Once their system becomes breached, then they have access to your system. So in this example here, it's important to understand what RoboCorp does. And again, for example, if the hospitals are using our robot technology and our system becomes breached, then the hospital systems becomes breached and vice versa. People can get seriously injured, millions of dollars can vanish overnight, and the trust we've spent years building can disappear in an instant. That's why we don't wait for problems to find us. We actively hunt for potential dangers and prepare comprehensive responses before trouble arrives at the door. As a GRC analyst and auditor, you'll be going into businesses, finding out what their functions are, and determining the possible risk. Okay. For example, if you were doing GRC for an auto dealership, okay, they have a car lot. What's the risk of having all these cars out in the open? There's a high risk. How do you handle that? What is risk in plain English? The maybe bad event. A risk is something negative that hasn't happened yet, but could. It's living in the realm of what if rather than what is. 2 key factors. We examine how likely it is to occur and how the big impact would be if it actually happened. This is very important. Take this note. We examine how likely it is to occur and how big the impact would be if it actually happens. Think of risk assessment like checking the weather forecast. You want to know two things. What's the chance of rain? And if it does rain, will it be light sprinkle that barely dampens the sidewalk or torrential downpour that floods the streets? This simple analogy helps us understand that not all risks are created equal. Some are minor inconveniences, while others can be business-ending catastrophes. And speaking of weather, in 2025, weather is a risk to all businesses. Let's suppose in this example, it's not a little sprinkle rain, but a torrential rain, and your part of the city floods. What happens to your data? Is it secure? Do you have it secured in the cloud? Do you have backup? Weather is very important also. So here are RoboCorp's 5 big risk categories. And as a GRC analyst, you would be going into a company analyzing that company's risk based on the trade, whether it's tech, medical, manufacturing, food industry, etc. So for RoboCorp, intellectual property theft, competitors stealing our robot designs, trade secrets, or proprietary algorithms through cyber attacks or insider threats. Intellectual property. Number 2, system outages, critical IT infrastructure failures that halt production, disrupt customer operations, or compromise data integrity. If there's a system outage and your systems go down and you're not able to conduct business, how long can you be out of business before you're out of business? So you need to have a backup system in case this occurs. Robot safety failures. Malfunctioning robots causing injuries to schools, hospitals, or factories, leading to lawsuits and regulatory actions. Number 4, vendor dependencies. Key suppliers failing to deliver components, going out of business, or suffering quality control breakdowns. In addition to vendor dependencies, in addition to that, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to vendor dependencies, I want to add on to vendor dependencies. If you're using a third party for services and they get hacked, for example, if you have a cybersecurity system that you get from a third party and that third party gets hacked, that means you get hacked. Very important. Most of cybersecurity breaches are happening from vendor dependencies. And then we have regulatory violations, accidentally breaking safety standards, data protection laws, or industry regulations in our global markets. Again, I'm going to stress upon you that as a GRC analyst, okay, there are some priorities. And one of them is making sure that data is secure. Number 2, making sure that you're not fined for some regulatory violation. And number 3, making sure you're not sued in court. Very important. So, how do we rank risk? How do we determine risk? Our simple 1 to 5 risk score. RoboCorp uses a straightforward scoring system that anyone can understand and apply consistently across different types of risk. We rate both likelihood and impact on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 represents minimal concern and 5 represents maximum danger. Now again, as a GRC analyst or auditor, when you do a risk assessment and you use a risk register, which we're going to go over, basically you're going to determine all the risk of the organization. And on a scale of 1 to 5, you will rank the importance of that risk. So let's go over to the likelihood scale. Number 1, almost never happens. Number 2, rare occurrences. Number 3, occasional possibility. Number 4, frequent concern. Number 5, almost certain to occur. For example, weather is very important right now because we're having all type of natural weather disasters, occurrences all across the nation. So, what is the likelihood that a tornado will come and knock down your building? We're not going to say that it's not impossible. So we're going to say I'm going to say rare occurrence. Okay? Now, let's suppose if a hurricane came and knocked down the building. What would be the impact? Number 1, minor inconvenience, small setback, moderate disruption, major business impact. No, I think it would be number 5, catastrophic consequences if a hurricane came and knocked down your building of operation with all of your uh, systems, hardware, etc. This standardized approach allows us to compare a potential cyber attack with a supply chain disruption fairly, even though they're completely different types of threats. It also helps prioritize our limited resources towards the risks that matter. Okay, writing crystal clear risk statements. Okay, step 1, because the cause, the underlying condition or vulnerability that creates the opportunity for something to happen. Okay, what is the cause? What's the underlying condition? Number 2, there is a chance, an event, the specific negative incident that we're worried might occur in the future. Okay, and number 3, which would lead to the result, the concrete business consequences that would follow if the event actually happens. So when we're putting together and assessing risk of organization, like I said, there's questions that we ask, and basically this is done on an Excel sheet that we're going to go over. Not in this lesson. There's going to be a specific lesson for creating a what they call a risk register. But in determining your risk, we have to determine, okay, what would be the cause of this happening? What would be the event? And what would be the result? Let's give an example. Because design files are shared over unsecured email, which is a no-no, there is a chance a hacker will intercept and steal our latest robot blueprints, which would lead to copycat competitors entering the market and a 20% drop in our sales within 6 months. What would be the underlying cause? The underlying cause is because design files are shared over unsecured email. That should never happen, but that would be, what's the cause? Why is this happening? An underlying condition or vulnerability that creates the opportunity for something bad to happen. What is that underlying condition? Design files being shared over unsecured email. This, as a GRC analyst, when you're interviewing individuals and you ask these questions, when you find this out, this is an absolute no-no. Files should never be shared over an unsecured email. But this is the underlying condition. This is the vulnerability. So as you're doing an audit and you find this out, hey, you're sharing files over unsecured email. That's the underlying condition. The event, because you're doing that, there's a chance that a hacker will intercept and steal our latest robot blueprints. And then what would be the result of that? Copycat competitors entering the market and 20% drop in sales within 6 months. So this is how we determine risk and categorize it. This 3-part structure forces us to think beyond vague worries like cybersecurity issues and instead create specific, actionable risk statements that everyone can understand and address. Okay, now We understand how we're building the risk, how we're categorizing the risk. So this risk is put into what we call a risk register. Now we're going to be doing a separate training just on risk registers. So a risk register transforms abstract concerns into trackable, manageable business tasks. Think of it as our central database where every identified risk gets its own detailed record card with all the essential information needed for proper management. Now, this is done in basically a Google Sheets or an Excel sheet. So we're going to go back to that example that we just had with the email, with designs being sent over unsecured email. So when we're in our Excel sheet, what is the risk name? Email design theft, because we're sending files over unsecured email. Email design theft. That's the name of the risk. The risk statement. Because design files are shared over email, there's a chance hackers will steal blueprints, leading to copycat competitors. That's the risk statement. So on the Excel sheet, it'll be the risk statement. The owner. Who's in charge of correcting this? That would be IT security. They're in charge of it. IT is in charge of it. And so there's a score. We'll go into scores later. And we have a status. It would say in progress. Now, here goes another risk. Server overload. This is the condition that causes the risk. Because we rely on a single data center, there's a chance the servers will crash during peak usage, leading to production delays. Now, as a GRC analyst, the fact that we should have backup servers in case the servers crash, and we need to increase the bandwidth always. As production increases, we need to increase the server's bandwidth or capabilities. Now, what is the condition? Server overload. The risk statement, because we rely on a single data center, which should never be the case, there's a chance that servers will crash during peak usage, leading to production delays. Now, there's the mini door theory. So instead of keeping all your data on one server, so if you're hacked, now the hacker has access to all of your information from all of your departments. That should never be the case. You should have your information spread out on different servers. So if you get a hack on one department's information, all the others are protected. So you don't keep all your eggs in one basket. So who would be in charge of the server overload? Operations. And then there's a score. And based on the progress, for example, the email design theft, correcting that is in progress. This one is planned. So based on the status will determine the score. So each entry includes the risk owner, who's accountable, likelihood and impact scores, planned treatments, and regular status updates. This systematic approach ensures no risk fails through the cracks and everyone knows their responsibilities. Right now, this risk register is completed through Excel or Google Sheets. There are some companies that have automated, and in time, there'll be some type of automated software that everyone can log on to and update it. So, inherent versus residual risk before and after. Inherent risk. This is a raw danger level before we implement any protective measures. It represents the worst case scenario if we do absolutely nothing to address the threat. So the inherent risk, where is it at if we do absolutely nothing? And then the residual risk. This is what remains after we have applied our controls and safeguards. Our goal isn't to reach zero risk. That's usually impossible, but to reduce it to an acceptable level. So if you hear inherent and residual risk before and Inherent is if we absolutely do nothing, and residual is after we make implementations to secure data. Now, there's three types of risk controls. There are preventive controls. These controls try to stop bad things from happening in the first place. Examples include secure file sharing systems, like you should never share documents over unsecured emails, access badges, and employee background checks. They're the first line of defense. Then we move into detective controls. These help us spot problems quickly when they do occur. Think security cameras, system monitoring alerts, and unusual download notifications. Fast detection means faster response. And then there are corrective controls. These help us cover and get back to normal after an incident. Backup systems, disaster recovery plans, and incident response teams fall into this category. They minimize the damage and restore operations. So remember, preventative controls, detective controls, and corrective controls. The most effective risk management strategies combine all three types of controls, creating multiple layers of protection that work together to keep RoboCorp safe and operational. You need all three. Now, for example, you may have secure email, okay, but what if your employee is downloading company files? You need something, and they're not supposed to. You need something to pick that up. Now, 4 smart ways to handle any risk. Number 1, reduce. Lower the likelihood or impact through controls like secure systems, training programs, or safety protocols. This is our most common approach. And a lot of times, security breaches happen because of one individual. All it takes is one individual to be slipping on the job, and then you're done. Transfer. Shift part of the risk to others through insurance, contracts, or outsourcing. We keep operational control but share financial consequences. In other words, you can't have the sales team doing your cybersecurity. Can't do that. You can't have the sales team doing your networking or your computer systems. No, you need to have a balanced, outsourced approach to risk. Accept, acknowledge the risk, but take no action because the cost of treatment exceeds the potential impact. Document this decision clearly. Tongue tied. Okay, and then last, and I want to go back to accept. Acknowledge the risk, but take no action because the cost of treatment exceeds the potential impact. Document this decision clearly. So, as a GRC analyst, you may go into a business and see where a control or something in the organization needs to be corrected. Doing that may be a financial burden. So, you need to document it clearly because in the future, if something happens, if they get sued, this audit that you've completed is going to be used, and it's going to clearly say in there your recommendation. So you want to document this. And last, avoid. Eliminate the risk entirely by not engaging in risky activity. Sometimes the simplest solution is to walk away from the danger. For our design theft example, we might reduce risk with secure file sharing and vendor NDAs, while also transferring some financial exposure through intellectual property insurance. The key is choosing the right combination of treatments that makes business sense for each specific risk. And again, risk is anticipating what could happen. And again, you have many businesses who have a secure cybersecurity system until they subcontract with a third party. It could be a supplier, a manufacturer who has a system that you log on to with your computer and their system is compromised, and as soon as you log into their system, now you're compromised. And now data is taken. Do you have insurance for that as a company? Does your vendor have insurance? And if they do, what's the maximum liability amount? If they don't, you have a problem. How much is it for? Does it meet the industry standard? So this is how we determine risk. Now, one of the things that we're going to be going over is there's going to be 2 trainings on how to put together a risk register. As a GRC analyst and auditor, you're going to have to go in and determine an organization's risk. Okay, so we're going to be doing some trainings on how to accomplish that. Look out for that. Okay, so again, thank you for joining us. Leave some comments. And also, this training is an introductory training. Again, look out for the blueprint that I'm going to be putting out that gives you the complete steps you should take for entry level jobs and GRC. Now, if you want to rush ahead, I have a friend of mine that I partnered with who put together a course, GRC Mastery, and my training is phase 1. His training is phase 2. And if you want to jump right into that, look at the link in the description. It's your choice. This training will go 2 or 3 months. I'm not quite sure. But again, look out for the training on putting together, a risk register. It's going to be 2 parts to that. And I'll see you in the next episode.